So let's have a look at this. The first thing I'm doing is just an initialization. And this is again for me to start using all the functions that I can inside my admin. So that means that this actually helps me getting access, for instance, to, in this case down here, I'm using admin to access my authentication part of Firebase and delete a user. And let's just stay with this for a second, because I had a great question right here. Why do you need to delete a user in functions? Why not just do it from Angular, some kind of front-end application? The problem is you can actually delete a user from your Angular, but with Angular Fire, you have to be logged in to delete the user with the current user that you want to delete. So the problem is I could actually delete users from Angular in two ways. One is I go in and I say, well, if I want to delete the user, I need to log in with the user first and then delete him. That's just stupid, because I would have to contact the user and ask him to log in and delete himself. That's the only way I could delete users. That's bad. So that's out of the way. It's okay if a user wants to leave my system, he can delete himself. That makes sense. But if I as an admin want to remove the user, it would be stupid. I would have to call him and ask him to delete himself. So instead, I need a way to kind of have like a user overview and then select the user and say, I want to delete this specific user. And again, some of you found a hack where you use the admin interface inside the Angular app. So that is possible, but then you would have to expose this file right here. And as soon as you put that file into Angular, anybody can access it, also a hacker, and he could use this file to access your entire Firebase setup. So again, we cannot trust clients, so we cannot share this on the client side. And that's why, again, we are using functions, because functions will be compiled and sent to the database, the backend, which means that it's behind the firewall. So nobody can access it from the outside. That means that nobody can get the files, like the secret JSON file, and nobody can access this code at all. So that's why we are kind of using functions to get changes to our backend that we don't feel the client should take care of. That's the main reason we're doing this. So that's kind of why we're doing that part. I'll just comment this out for now. Not that it's any harm or anything, but I of course want to change this into being written probably with a better structure. Okay, so now we have our different functions right here. And each of these functions needs to have a unique name. Now we could, again, if we wanted to be even more precise, we could actually start splitting this into smaller functions if we wanted to, but instead I just want an overview about everything that I want to do in here. So I have my different remove stock, I have a product written, I have a new product, and a product update. So I just want to keep an overview in here about all the different function triggers that I'm using. But again, we could split this up into small area, like only an order should, maybe I could put that in an order file, and product could put that in product file and stuff like that. But I really don't feel that that's important right now. But again, the important part here is that functions is just a way for us to enable triggering and listening for specific events, and then using those events to do something in another area in Firebase. So that's all the functions are doing for us. In reality, functions is not bound directly to Firestore, but it does have a trigger to Firestore. And then we can again do anything we want to do in here. Maybe we just wanted to lock that an order was created. That's all we wanted to do. You could do that in here as well. You don't have to call Firestore and do something, change data in Firestore. You could also use it just for logging. Again, like I said, we could send an email when a new user was deleted, just saying, you just deleted John. Are you sure you want to do that? Here's the data. You can just recreate him, stuff like that. So we are just in here to have triggers that can do something. But what we do with the triggers is completely up to you. So that's functions. Before we take a real break, I just want to finish the overview, just to kind of give you guys the key points right here, and then we can do some code after a 5-minute break. So now, again, this file is the only place pretty much that works with functions. So this is the only place that works with functions, and that's almost true. But right now I'm actually cheating a little bit, because right now in my controller, I'm actually still using change document snapshot and document data and event context, meaning that right now my controller is actually polluted with some function specific data right here. Now, I will try to find a good way to change that for the interface, because I don't feel that should be done in the interface. I feel we need to move that into this file, the controller for Firebase, but let's just live with that for now. It's not something that I want to raise any flags about right now. It'll make our testing a bit tougher, but it will still be possible to test this, and I'll show an example of that later on. But now we're moving away from functions, and we're moving into our own structure right here. This is kind of the clean architecture, and pretty much also the same thing you did for your controller, service, and repository in your 3rd semester project. So again, this is where you should recognize the structure and the architecture. Let's just start here, because again, this was a concern that was raised as well, that there's a lot of strange classes right here that we don't really get. They are weird, to be honest. And I've seen these 3 classes that I'm going to show you now, and I feel if you understand those 3 classes, you can pretty much do everything we need to do for now. And the 3 classes are the change class. Let's go into that one first. The change class is just a place where you can have 2 different files, so 2 different documents instead of 1 document. So that's the only thing the change class kind of provides for you. What are you doing, Daniel? Is there no internet? Okay, so that's the change class, and again, it just provides a way for you to have a before scenario and an after scenario. Now this is kind of cool, because we can go in, again, if we go back to our functions area right here, the trigger, if we do onWrite and we get this change document, that means that actually we can get both before we made the change and after we made the change. And then if you want to, you could start again, you could start doing some sums, or you could maybe say, before I had sold 2, now I've sold 3, I don't know. You have the before and after data, you can use that for something if you want to. You could log the changes. So this is kind of what you're getting, the before data and the after data. That's why you need the change class. So that's the first class we have that's kind of strange. And this is a functions class. It's coming from Cloud Functions. So this is just a way for you to kind of object-oriented have 2 different documents to talk to. Okay, that's the change class. Then we have the document snapshot class, and that's the one you also used in Angular kinda. The document snapshot class provides a way for you to have information about the data in the current snapshot. And I think that's kind of the main thing you'll use it for. So that means that when I have a document snapshot, like I do here in the before and in the after, I can say .data, and then you'll pretty much just think of it like you're getting the entire JSON data from your database, right? Or the JavaScript object from the database. So this would be your data set from the current changed object. Okay, so let's try and just jump into Firebase right here. So in the case of writing a new product, what will happen is the data I'll get is only the data you see over here, the actual document data, right? That's what you're getting. So that's all you're getting. But that might not be enough. Maybe I also want to get the ID, right? So that's, now let's actually wrap this up. So that's all you're getting with the document snapshot. That's pretty much to grab the data that you want. Now you have other things you can get from this, but I think the data is everything you need. You can get read time, you can get update time, you can ask if it even exists, this current document, the created time, so you have other fields as well. But I think the most important one is the data one, to kind of get our actual data that we want to work with. The final field you have is the context field. So if we go back to the index file, you can put parameters in here in the end. And you actually have to do this. We figured that out in one of the sessions as well. We had an error right here where we couldn't, the document wouldn't work. And then we actually had to put in this syntax right here, and then the document worked again for on write and on create, and actually also on update. So we put in this syntax right here, the curly brackets, and then some kind of name. And now that's going to be mapped right here. This name right here is going to be mapped to context.params.the name I put in here. Okay, so that's why when I send in the context right here, what's going to happen is inside my Firebase, I can now say context.params.prod.id. And that means I can now get the ID for the product that was just written, or the product that was deleted, or the product that was updated. I can now get that data. So that's what we're using the context for. And I do feel that's the only thing you have to know for now. You can do more things with the params. You can do more things with the context, with the snapshot, with the change. But for now, just keep it simple. And we might end up needing more than that. But let's look at it when we get to that point. So I think that pretty much covers everything you have to know about functions. Okay, so that's the function. So consider that as its own small area called functions. And you have to understand also that when we're talking functions, we are only working in the controller and the index. That's pretty much everything that has to do with functions. The rest is going to be Firestore specific, maybe file storage, maybe you want to have some authentication, that's up to you, but it's not functions doing the work. All functions are doing again is triggering when events happen in your backend and sending you data from those triggers, right? So that's functions. So what else do we have? Well, I don't want to spend too much time on the service because this is something you know. So I kind of just redirect this data. My controller takes care of mapping the data. And I'll show you guys because I want you to test this as well. At least I'm going to do it. And then depending on your time frame when we get to the real project, I think it's a good idea to test this because a lot of things can actually go wrong right here in my controller. Like you also saw that in your own systems. Again, I'm not going to force anybody to test this, but I'm going to try and test it so you have some examples on how to do it if you want to. Maybe there's no before snap. So when I do before.data, I'll get a null reference exception. Right now, I'm not handling it in any way. I need to handle that. Maybe it's actually not a product I'm getting right here. I'm not that concerned about that because I'll let my service handle that and return a reject if that's the case. But maybe there's no ID in the params. Well, I might as well just stop right here and send an exception. So the point is that we can test this as well if we want to make sure that things are actually okay here. But the controller's job is pretty much just to take the data from whoever is providing the data and map it into something that my service can use. And when it's done, maybe unmapping what I'm returning to return to the functions, whatever that needs. But in this case, the function just needs a promise. So it's really not important what I'm returning pretty much, except that it should be a promise, of course. Sweet. Then we go to the service, and the service is something you're used to. This is where the logic will happen, right? And depending on your logic, you might want to save some data, like I'm doing right here. And the repository, again, that's just a way for us to store data somewhere. Right now we're using Firebase, but again, that could be anything. With Firestore, we have the certain possibilities, and you could do the same thing with an SQL database if you wanted to. Just have to put in some different queries and you would be up and running again. And also you have to pay a bit more money because Firebase doesn't out-of-the-box support communication with the outside world, just so you know. So this is just saving the data, and then when the service is done working, it might send a rejection back, or it might send a promise back that everything went well, and then Firestore will know, or Firebase will know that we're done with the function, and we will log a bit of information, and then we'll execute and change whatever you guys ask to change. That's functions for you. It's really not that complex. It's just hard to write and to kind of wrap your head around the first time, especially because there's so much that you need to understand to get going with functions. And then I thought, why not make it even harder for these guys by putting in test-driven development? Yep, sorry. Even without test-driven development, this setup makes sense. This is something that I expect you all understanding as developers, that splitting up your code into smaller chunks makes it easier to read and easier to write and easier to share with others. It makes it easier for you to do commits in your system, actually, because you won't have as many merge conflicts. If this was just one huge file, you'll start having a lot of merge conflicts. You'll have an easier time separating in a team and saying, you take care of the product controller or the products area, and I'll take care of the order area. And it just makes it easier to kind of separate your code and talk about it in different areas. It also makes it easier for you to reuse code. Makes perfect sense as well. And then as the final cool thing, you'll get a lot easier time testing your code if you should be one of those crazy guys who ends up testing your code. Sweet. I'll give you a break soon, but I just want to take the second part, which is testing, because that's another thing that scared a lot of you and that was really, really hard to get started with. And again, I completely understand this is tough, this is hard, but I expect that most of you now start seeing at least some kind of sense, and maybe you can even start writing your own test now. And it might fail, it might be hard, you might not test everything, but that doesn't matter. As long as you just start playing around with it and getting just a few tests in there, I'm happy, man. So I've made this product service test, and I think let's actually do this one instead. And this is the one we're going to build on today. I feel that this is all it takes actually to get started with testing right here. This is the main files to get started with testing. So I decided to make something completely from scratch just to show you guys how easy it is, or no, I shouldn't say easy because it's again, it's very complex, but how little code you can actually start out with. And then slowly today we'll start evolving this code, and I'll try to explain every library I bring into play and just explain why I'm using it and how I'm going to use it. But before we do that, again, you have to set this up one time. So you have to go into your package.json file and set up the jest part, right? You have to go into your file and set up the mock part right here. And again, I don't need these two, so let's just get rid of them in order to not confuse you guys. So I need mock.ts and I need the jest and these two jest to get started. It's just something I need to get up and running with my testing. The second thing I need is the config file right here. And that's something that, again, is hard to understand, but you don't have to understand it. You just have to put it in there. And if you don't want to understand it, you're just forced into using your folders in a certain way. So in my case, if you use my file, then you have to create a test folder. Okay, so you have to create a folder right here called test. you also have to put in the name test or spec somewhere in your files in order for it to find those files. And then if you want to be even more precise, in my case, I've started adding some testers, some helpers right here for my tests. Then you need to also add ignore path, and you have to put that under helpers if you want to reuse my config file. So all of this is something that you can go and read about if you want to, or you can just, it's perfectly fine for me if you just use the jest file as it is, the config file, and just work from that file, that'll be fine. But then again, you have to use the right structure. So that's very important. And the final thing, and I think this is mainly Mac-based, because I've seen a lot of you having only one config file right here, and that works perfectly. Just go with that. Just keep that config file and be happy. But if you do end up in issues when you build, that you end up having a bad structure in your library with both a test and a source folder, then come to me or try to use the setup that I did with these tree files. And then in the package.json file, you have to also point to the build file when you're doing a build. So again, it's up to you, but that's how you can fix it. So that's pretty much all I have to do. And then my test framework is up and running. And then I have to set in code like this in my first test file. And I'm actually ready to start my test-driven development from there. And I have a small thing, because last time when I kind of showed you guys the small coding example, I actually ended up failing. I couldn't get the deployment to work. Actually, the deployment worked, but I couldn't get it to create a stock when I created a product. I just want to show you what my problem actually was, because you guys might end up in a similar situation. It was actually because inside my stock repository, right here, I was using a function on the document. So I was using like doc right here instead. And then I used the create function like this. And actually this function fails. And I tried to Google it, and I tried to figure out why the create function didn't work, but actually didn't find a good solution or a good answer. So actually you have to say either set and then paste in the data like this. That works. Or you can go and use the add like I did right here with a collection instead. So we'll do db.collection.add, and then everything was working. So that was kind of my issue I had right there. So I just wanted to mention that. But again, the cool thing for me was it was very, very easy for me to see the problem, because I could see my deployment was working. I could see my controller did get the right data. My service got the right data, but it couldn't save the data. So I was 100% sure where to look. I knew that this was my problem right here. I just had to figure out why it was a problem. And the error it kind of threw at me was just impossible to understand what the problem was. But with the error and writing Firestore, I found a couple of posts that talked about the create function not working as expected, but I just didn't find the right answer to using it. So instead, I just used the add function now. Gives me the same thing. I can go to the stocks path, and then I can add a new stock right here into my stock path. So I just want to mention that. I also want to mention right now that notice that for my functions, I only have a stock repository available right now with a single function. I don't have all the different things that could actually be there, like we have in the products, like a service, a controller, because I don't need those right now. So again, don't create those files until you need them. Try to be test-driven. Try to have the mindset of test-driven development in this new project you're going to build. So what I've done is, and what I want to show you guys is, we're going to try and see if we can actually get up and running with when we create an order with some order lines right here. What I hope can happen is I'm going to trigger an order service, and that order service is going to hopefully go in and in the stock count the products down the amount they should be counted down. And again, we can extend that slowly to say you're not allowed to count down lesser than 1, right? Or 0, sorry. You can't go lower than 0. We could check that. We could also say before the order is executed, we can actually go in and validate that we still have enough in stock to make the order and stuff like that. So we could do a lot of things with this setup right here. What I want to do right now is the simple one. I just want to for now say that when I set an order, I want to just count stock down with the amount inside the order. So there's a lot of things we actually need to make that running. So what I've done is I've created, like I showed you, a new test right here called order service. So that's the one I want to build right here. And I want to just start out with creating an order service, because I probably need that for building my system. And if we should be completely test driven, I should actually go in. I should actually go in here and create an order service right here. So let's just do that for now. So I'll say let order service like this, and that's going to be of the type order service. Order service. Now notice it doesn't know order service, right? Because it doesn't exist yet. So let's go create that. And let's go and create an order service. New file, order service, GS. Going to export the class. You can just slow me down if you feel that I'm talking too fast or I'm writing the code too fast. I don't think I am, because I have to rethink this every time. So there we go. Now we have the order service. Let's go down to our test again and see if we can import that guy now. Now we have the order service available like this. Now we're not using it anywhere and we're not declaring it. So that fails right now. And again, if you guys want to get away from that error for now, you can just console log it. You're happy. So before each, what we want to do is we want to create an order service. So let's make a new order service right here. There we go. Now we kind of have an order service to work with. That's fine. Next step is we're going to try and create our first it right here. So we want to just test that order service needs a order repo, something like that. And again, you guys will probably think that's why waste our time here. This is completely overkill, right? But the truth is, by making this code right here, when you guys, as I said, I'm going to probably end up letting you guys take this code and expand on it for the exam project. Right here, you guys get an indication right away that we need an order service. And I could even be more precise if I wanted to. So I get kind of documentation right here just by making this simple statement right here. So what I want to do here is I want to say order service equals new order service. In order to build it, I'm going to need a repository, order repository. I have that right here, but I don't have a mark for it. And now I want to show you my helper that I built. This is my small helper class that I started building, because I might need these guys other places as well. So I'm going to make a new method right here. Say, I'll upload this so you can go and grab it if you want to. Get order repository mock. It'll return an order repository mock. And the reason that I'm building this is to make it easier to kind of reuse my code and make it easier to kind of have one place where all these different mocks and stuff like that are hidden, so I don't pollute my code with the same code again and again. Good, so now let's try and go back to our code in the test. So now let's say we need a mock as well. We'll say let order repository. Repository. That's going to be of an iMock. That's going to contain order repository. There we go. And now let's initialize that. So let's say order repository equal, and then we'll use the helper right here. So I'm just going to get access to that helper, test helper. Just make it a new test helper. There we go. And I'll say test helper dot get order mark repository. Okay, so I kind of just cheat a little bit here, and again, I'm building my code now to kind of use these marks and get them out of the way. Again, the cool thing is, if you guys want to later on with the helper, as my mock starts growing, I only have to do those methods in here and do another setup and stuff like that one place to expand my mocks, right? You don't have to do it every time you write a method. And you can still overwrite the methods later if you want to, so it's not going to be a problem. Okay, so now we have the order repository mock right here, and of course I need to put that inside my order service. You can't do that because the order service doesn't know anything about this mock. Okay, let's try and just execute it then and add it. So I create the constructor. It's not a mock. It's going to be order repository like this. Now the reason it failed, let's actually undo that. I just want to show you guys why it failed. Let's just go back to the test. It's of course because I forgot to say .object right here, because I actually want the implementation. I don't want the mock, right? I want the implementation class. Let's just stay with mock for a second right here. A mock is a way for you to fake methods and to listen for when methods are called, what methods return, so you can fake an entire implementation, right? That's the idea with a mock. And in order to use that implementation, you say .object, and then you'll actually get an implementation class, but the implementation class will only contain what is inside your setup file right here, the setup and the return files. That's all it will contain. So if I have a method right here in the repository that I haven't specified right here, it wouldn't be able to find that method inside my test, if that makes sense. So that's what a mock does for me, and that's why I need to say object, because now it's actually an implementation. So if I try again, you'll notice I'll get a different implementation right here. It'll say now it knows it's actually an order repository, right? So now it knows it's going to use that interface. And let's just do it private right here. Remove the one. There we go. So now we have the order repository in here. And there we go. And actually, I just want to continue. I want to go one step further. Let's actually just add this guy here. And a stock repository, because I know it needs that as well. Beautifully spelled. So let's just add that as well. And now again, we don't have the stock repository, but this time, since I used my helper, I can go in and I can say stock repository is going to be equal to a stock repository mock, an iMock of the type stock repository. And then since I actually have my test helper, I can say test helper dot get stock repository. So that's already created there because I did that earlier, right? So now I can start reusing my repositories, and it just makes it easier for me to work. And then I can add a stock repository dot object right here. And again, it'll complain that I don't have that. So let's go and create that with, let's go and create that inside the constructor right here. I'll make it private now. It tries to help me. Just refactor it. I'll figure it out myself. Private. There we go. So now I have the two repositories that I need, and I can start using those inside my order service. And then my test can be that I expect order service to be, is there someone, I just want to see if there's something that shows that is, okay. To be truthy. That might be a better one. Oh, there's actually one to be defined. That was the one I was looking for. Like this. So that's my test. See if we pass. There we go. Now it seems I have a test suite that fails. Yeah, of course. So it won't actually work again. And this is the problem with testing right now is lint will actually stop me right here and say, you don't have, order repository is not used for anything. So again, I don't know. I'll just for now do a console log just to kind of see that this is working. I'll console log the order repo and I'll console log the stock repo. This. Now, why are you complaining, you angry? Oh yeah, you need to do this in front of it. Of course, because it's private. There we go. Let's see if we can get the test up and running. Let's just give you guys a bit more space. 6 tests passed. So again, we have a test that's passing now. So again, that was kind of setting up my environment right here. So let's continue. Now the first thing I want my service to do is I want to test that my service can buy something, right? So I want to, in the order service, I want to create a new method called add. That's what I want to do. So when I add a new order, I want to count the stock down. And again, as I say, this is a pretty good explanation also about what I want to achieve with the code, right? So again, when you guys come and read it later, it makes sense for you, hopefully, that this is why I'm building what I'm building. In order to do this, I need a few things. So we are just going to try and do a step-by-step right here. But in order for this to make sense, maybe I wanted my order service to be able to do other things like place order before I execute order, validate order, maybe that would also make sense. So maybe those would be tests before this guy, but I want to go to the point where I can try and show you guys that I limit the stocks. So that's why I'm kind of skipping those 2 tests for now. So again, this time we don't have to create an order service because we already have one available right here using the 2 mock objects. So what I want to do is I want to say order service dot execute order. That was the name I decided to call it. And I can't spell that, it seems. There we go. Execute order. Also just call it execute. It's going to send in an order that I want to execute. And let's just start there. So first of all, you'll notice right here, I don't have an execute and I actually don't have an order to pass in. So let's start by going to my helper to create an order that I can pass in. So I'm just going to go down here and create an order of the type order. And again, this is just a helper class to kind of help me out building these different things. Let's have a look at order, what it's all about. And you'll notice that it has a few things, including order line array, right? I'll just keep the visible there just for the fun of it. Let's go back to the helper. So an order should have a unique identifier. Let's just put in a unique identifier right here. You can discuss if I need that unique identifier. I probably don't need it, but I'll just keep it for now. Order 1, put in a date. Let's just take now. Put in Maybe the name date is not the best. It's a number. Did I put a number? Let's just make this into a number for now. That's fine, because I'll just keep the date as number. That's fine. And we have the order lines and the visible. Go back and do those. Make the order visible false in the beginning. And then we'll create some order lines. Whoops. And let's make the first order line. So now we have an order line, and we could do another one. But again, I think in order for me to start testing the order lines, I'll actually do the same thing right here and just add a couple of order lines. And notice this is just like we did. This is just test data, right? So I'm just building a bit of test data here that I can use for my testing. Order, get the order. I need that anyway. Actually rename that guy to order 1 if I want to add more. You could also, if again, when you start testing, if you want to have multiple orders, it's very easy now to do. Yeah, you can rename that. It's very easy now to do for loops and get like 500 or 1,000,000 orders or whatever you want, right? You can just start changing IDs and stuff like that. So you have use these helpers however you want. Just get the order 1 instead. Same with the order line. There we go. So now we have a bit of test data we can work with. Jumping back to the test. So now I can say test helper dot get order line 1. There we go. Sweet. And now we of course need the execute command. I'm actually going to call it execute order anyway. And I could also define what I expect should be returned when the execute command is done. And I want to return a promise in my case. Let's just put an async keyword right here. Whoops. And do const promise. For now, I'm just going to put in a promise that's going to return the order that was created, like this. And now it's kind of to see if I can get my IDE to actually write the entire set of code that I need. So that's just what I'm trying right here. So it doesn't exist. And then of course I need to go and create this one. There we go. Actually, it didn't help me anyway, so thanks. And I also by mistake put in the order line instead of the order. So good job, Lars. But still, I need to just fix that in the code, make it proper. So we need to get an order in there. And we need to return a promise with the actual order. And then of course here we'll just for now return promise resolve. There we go. With the order inside it. Sweet. Let's try and go back to our test. So now we have the methods available. And instead of doing it like this, I want to get the actual order back that I just called. And that's why I add the async keyword, because now I can actually await right here. And then what I can get back is the actual order. So I don't need to put in the promise, because what I'm getting back here is actually going to be the order after execute. Oh. And for now, to kind of get going, I could check that that order after execute is actually there. Then I'll see if my promise actually works. So it passed. That means that my promise worked, right? And I got an order back. Sweet. So now I need to actually start writing the real code. And the first thing I want to test in my case is going to be that I'm calling, how should we do this? How should I test this? Again, this is, I feel that it's extremely important that you guys, when you do testing like this, you always have to consider every step in your code. You always have to consider what should actually happen in the use case of creating an order, executing an order. What should actually happen? Well, step one is I should probably validate that the data is okay. So first of all, do I even have order lines? If I don't have order lines, you shouldn't be able to execute the order, right? Let's just go back here and say, I'm going to do the same thing right here, but I actually expect that I'm going to get back an exception. If there is no order lines, I want to throw an exception. That's what I want to test. So I'm going to get some help. And you can see I've already been in here, and this is how you can do it. I make a call inside these parentheses right here, and I expect that it throws some kind of error. So let's try and do that. So I'll say expect, sorry. Let's just do it the same way they're doing it. So here we'll put in the method. To throw. And again, just like in there we go. Just like when working with C#, you could actually see, you can throw different exceptions, but I'm actually going to use the same one he's using, the type error, because that's the one I have. So this is kind of a test right here, just saying that I expect that an exception is thrown if I don't have any order lines. But right now I don't get, that exception is not thrown, right? And if I look at my order, it also had order lines right now actually. So if you check out the order, it actually does have order lines right now. So that's fine, but let's actually make the test run instead. So what I'll do is I'll change my order. So I'll create a constant right here. Create an order right here. Oh, I don't want it to be constant because I want to, fuck it, I'll make it constant. And I'm getting the order, and then I'm just going to set it to an empty array. And then I'll pass in the order like this. So this is just to show you guys, you can easily manipulate the data you're getting from your helpers before you actually pass them in. So it is possible to make changes there if you want to. And if you want to, again, I made one small mistake right here. If you want to be sure that the test helper is reset every time a new test is run, you can do it like this, and then it will kind of reset the test helper every time. So that's also a possibility. Going to be at the type test helper. There we go. Now to reset every time, so you don't risk having data that's been manipulated somehow in a test, right? But still we fail, and that makes sense because we're actually not returning an error right now even though we don't have any order lines. Let's go to our execute order right here and go in and say if order.order lines, if it's not there, like this, or the length is less than 1. Shouldn't say not there. Get rid of that. Then I want to throw a new error, and let's see if we can find that type error and put in you need a order lines to execute a order, something like that. And maybe the test will pass now. It's passed. So again, I just did a bit of validation right here. You can be more precise because I can actually go and figure out what the actual exception should be. The text right here should match. And I can't remember if somebody tells an example of that in here. Yeah. So notice right here, you can put into throw and then the actual message name. Let's just try and do that just to see if that is actually working. Then it won't test that it's a specific error. It'll instead just test the message we're getting back. Like this. There we go. So you can do that as well if you want to. So you can test the error type or you can test the actual information. And of course you can do both if you want to. Like this, I can just test that it's a type error and that's actually also what it kind of throws. Okay. So now I've tested that and I could keep going. You could start testing everything in your order, of course, if you wanted to, before you can even place an order or execute an order. Maybe place order is better, but okay. So that was the first thing. Now, when I execute the order, I want to know more because I expect that when you execute the order right here, I expect that my order service is calling my stock and changing the stock for every product that I have, right? So now again, I have to think responsibility. Should my stock service or my stock repository, should that actually be able to place an order for, place something for an entire order, right? Or should I instead call the stock repository multiple times with different products, right? So the question right here is, should I have like lower stock for an order like this? So it will go in and just lower the stock for every product inside the order. That's one solution. Or should I instead lower stock for a single product and then let the order service take care of checking each stock? Now this is just responsibility, so it's pretty much up to you, right? So I'm going to try and use the solution where it's going to be per product instead of per order, because my stock repository already knows about a product, so I don't need the order in there since my order service knows how to kind of split things into products. Good, so let's just get rid of that for now, get rid of that, but it's just, again, it's to show you guys you have a consideration every time. Good. So let's try and go back to our service. And what I want to do right here is I want to say that I want to verify that my stock repository, when I'm executing this order right here, I want to verify that my stock repository was actually called some kind of amount of time with a specific method. And let's just say stock repo right here. And I want to say stock repo dot, let's call it lower stock. And this, in this case, what lower stock would be called with is my order. Let's actually get the order lines in here so we can see them. Right, so now I have my order lines. And in this case, I know there's only a single, because again, you have full control over this, right? You have full control since this is your test data. So I know that my order lines only contains one right now, one order line. Let's go back to the test. And I expect right here that my order line has a single order. So I can say order lines dot, zeroth location, because I know that's the first order line and I know it exists, the product. That's what I want to pass in to lower the stocks. And actually I could be, again, it's really up to you guys. I could also say that I'm actually just passing in the order line and then the stock will take care of figuring that one out. But again, to make it, in my mind, I just want to split it into two, and then the amount that I want to lower it with, like this. That's what I want to kind of pass in. And then the second thing I want to do is I want to say times exactly 1. So it's going to be called 1 time. Since I only have one order line, it should only be called once in this test right here. So I could up here again in my comments say, to be more precise, that is the order line count of 1. Okay. So I need the lower stock inside my stock repo. Let's go and create that one. There we go. And again, it's really up to you what you want to return. In this case, let's just return a promise. Type void. I don't want anything back. So there we go. Test still fails, which makes perfect sense because inside my service right now, I'm still not calling lower stocks. Let's go into the service, stock repository, dot lower stock. And then again, with the current test that I did, I'll actually have to do something like this because I'm only expecting one still, right? And say order.order line. And yes, you're right. This is of course not good code practice. It's actually really bad code practice because of course I don't want to specify a certain product right here. But that's kind of what my test specified for now. Test still fails because you cannot read undefined of product. But let's just for now fix this. There we go. Now the reason it fails is because that it doesn't know the method. It doesn't know the method execute order, lower stock is not defined on stock repository. And this is what I'm talking about. Since we are using mock services right here, even though I have a lower stock right here in my interface, it doesn't exist right now in the fake implementation class. So I have to go to my test helper and create that new method. So that's just something I have to do to start using lower stock right here. So let's try and go to my stock repository method right here and do an extra setup to get this new method in there. And this is very confusing in the beginning especially, but think of it this way, it's just for you to kind of build the same thing that you need inside your Firebase implementation class later on, right? So I'm just setting up the same methods that I'm going to need in there, right? So I'm expecting right here that I'll get product run in this setup, and I'm expecting that I will get the amount of 1. That's what I'm expecting. And then what will I return if this is good? I'll pretty much just return a promise result because it was a promise void. So now I've set this up in here as when the lower stock method is called in the fake implementation class, the mock, it should return a result, and then it should lower stock where it sends in this method with this amount. Go back to the test and see if that helped. Now we have a passing test. Now all the test is doing for us is just testing that this method is called 1 time, right? And it's being called 1 time if I have 1 order line. That's all it's testing. I'm also testing, of course, that it's being called with the amount of 1 in this case, which I did inside the helper right here. Okay,